Hello and welcome to Beyond the Bio, the recap. In these short episodes, I'm recapping Monday's show, having a bit of a reflection time, and coming up with an action that you and I can take today as a result of that topic. If you missed Monday's show, please go back and take a listen. It was a fairly short solo episode this week, and we will pop a link to it in the show notes. This week, I was chatting to myself all about invisible PR. Have you heard that term before? It's what people think or say about you when you're not in the room. It can often be made up of a series of small actions that on their own seem pretty inconsequential, but they all add up to the view that someone is going to have of you. And I think this covers your online and offline activity. I was talking about that phrase about being good to people on your way up, as you'll never know who you might meet on your way down. And I gave an example from my graduate days when I was a fresh-faced graduate at a very well-known retailer and had experience of this when I was junior, when I started the role, and then experiencing the same people when I became more senior in that organisation, and how their interactions with me were very different in those two scenarios. So it was a little bit going back in time to reflect on those things. And the fact that I can still remember these examples like 20-something years later says a lot in terms of how they made me feel and the lasting impact of those interactions. Really, really interesting. I also did a little exercise where I was talking about a few famous people that you will definitely have heard of, but probably have not met. We talked about what sprung to mind when you thought of those people and the impact that has. I gave a great example of a story that Stephen Bartlett tells about invisible PR and an experience he had on a plane, as well as an experience that he had within his own team that led to a team member getting a promotion. Definitely worth going back and having a listen if you missed out on that show. So this week's Take Action is going to be a little bit of a reflection. It is an action, but it's going to be a thinking action that I would suggest that you do actually write down. When we did the exercise with the famous people, and I was reading out those names, I want you to think, what would people say about you if they were talking about you and you weren't in the room? So what would your colleagues say if they were asked to describe you in 3 words, as an example? What would people in your industry say about you? What would people that you care about say about you? And this might be linked to your strengths, to your values, but it's an interesting exercise. And I would encourage you to dig deep and think about what negative words might they associate with you. While it might not be the words that we associated with Donald Trump when we were thinking about orange as a keyword and crazy and all these sorts of things, whilst it might not be as extreme as that, what would they say about you when you're at your worst? Because I think that is also very interesting. And I was reflecting on when I'm not at my best and when I know I need to pull back from being visible and going to events and just having a little bit of time out, because I don't want someone's interaction with me to just be when I'm really tired and irritable, because that is not helpful to me in any way. It's not how I am 90% of the time. And it's certainly not an impression I'd want to give of myself to somebody in any context. So bit of reflection time, and maybe you go and have a chat with somebody that you know, somebody that you trust. Maybe you pick a circle of people and do kind of a 360 feedback style where you approach someone at work, someone you respect and admire that's maybe in your industry, maybe a friend, maybe a family member, and you ask them for the 3 words that they would use to describe you. And maybe you really put yourself out there and say one of those words needs to be something negative. It needs to be an aspect of my brand or my personality that actually isn't a mega positive. Because the reality is, if you ask people to do this exercise, they'll come up with 3 really nice words. But let's make it a bit spicy. Let's ask them for something that is a bit more constructive as well. And then it then gives you that perspective, that holding the mirror up and thinking about how you do come across. So there we have it, my take action for this week. As always, let me know how you get on, and I'll see you on Monday.